So it seems like Ukraine is currently experiencing what I would like to refer to as a little bit of shock therapy while they continue to undergo their immediate crisis. And that seems to be manifesting in the forms of the banning of political parties. And I thought about making this video due to the news that we got a couple of days ago with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky banning quite a vast array of political parties, specifically opposition parties that are seemingly, nominally at the very least, on the left. And I want to read to you quickly something from the Economic Times that details a bit of the situation, and then we'll really get into this. So, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has ordered to suspend activities of 11 political parties with links to Russia. The largest of them is the opposition Platform for Life, which has 44 out of 450 seats in the country's parliament. The party is led by Viktor Medvedchuk, who has friendly ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is the godfather of Medvedchuk's daughter. Also on the list is the Nashi party, led by Yevgeny Muriev. I'm botching all these names. Before the Russian invasion, the British authorities had warned that Russia wanted to install Muriev as the leader of Ukraine. Speaking in a video address early Sunday, Zelensky said that given a large-scale war unleashed by the Russian Federation and links between it and some political structures, the activities of a number of political parties is suspended for the period of the martial law. He added, activities by politicians aimed at discord and collaboration will not succeed. Zelensky's announcement follows the introduction of the martial law that envisages a ban on parties associated with Russia. Now, this is a Twitter thread from Challenge Magazine that gives us a little bit extra, specifically the parties that were indeed banned. So this goes as follows. In a live stream last night, this wasn't last night, this was several days ago, Ukrainian President Zelensky ordered the banning of the nation's 11 remaining left-wing opposition parties. And these are the parties. So you have the For Life Party, the Syrizh's Party, Nashi, Opposition Bloc, Left Opposition, Union of Left Forces, Dorzava, the Progressive Socialist Party of Ukraine, Socialist Party of Ukraine, the Socialist, and Vladimir Saldo's Bloc. They also go on to say, accusing the now banned parties as being pro-Russian, it appears that Zelensky has distorted the truth, with some of those parties being anti-war. Since 2015, the Communist Party of Ukraine has been banned, and with its members facing severe repression in 2015, also saw the banning of communist symbols. The latest banning reflects a continuation of the Ukrainian government's anti-socialist and anti-communist stance, portrayed by the West as a champion of free speech and democracy. Zelensky's exploitation of martial law has enabled him to bypass parliamentary procedures and subsequently ban any political opposition. Despite banning left-wing opposition, the nation's neo-Nazi groups continue to receive praise, honors, and medals from the Ukrainian president. Now, this is outstanding, and I say it's outstanding because of the moment that we're in. And I outlined earlier in the video, or I call this a form of shock therapy. And shock therapy is essentially, as far as I can recollect, a term that was coined, or I came to know about it from a book that I read that was written by a woman by the name of Naomi Klein. She's a political activist slash analyst or author or whatever. She's a Canadian. And I want to read you a quick paragraph from her book. It's pretty short. So, believers in the shock doctrine are convinced that only a great rupture, a flood, a war, a terrorist attack can generate the kind of vast, clean canvases they crave. It is in these malleable moments when we are psychologically unmoored and physically uprooted that these artists of the real plunge in their hands and begin their work of remaking the world. And so I think this is a pretty interesting concept to apply here. Not necessarily because this is something unprecedented, as I read there before. This is something that's been going on for some time. Even Zelensky's predecessor was banning left-wing opposition, such as communist parties and groups and what have you. So this has been going on for some time. But you can see that they are currently in the Ukraine. They're currently in a situation of crisis with this war that's going on against Vladimir Putin and Russia. And they're swooping in the leaders, the people with all the power, to make these permanent changes. And notice how I said permanent, because you have to think to yourself, after this war blows over, Zelensky or anybody else isn't going to come out and unban these opposition parties. No, they did that for a reason, and I'll leave it up to you to speculate what their reasons are. I don't really want to divulge into that. But as far as I can see it, the shock doctrine applies here in this moment of great crisis. They have swept in to make these permanent changes to further whatever narrative or goal they would like to persist. And it's quite amazing when you look at it from the Western media perspective. This is a tweet from Mr. David Fromm. I'll pop up on the screen right here. He says, Ukraine may be the first example in human history of a country that under the pressure of war is becoming more tolerant and more liberal. Well, it may seem to me, and I'm sure many others, that more tolerance and more liberalism doesn't necessarily equate, given the definitions of the two words, to the banning of opposition parties, of left-wing parties, of places where people can express their opinions and use their voices. And what that does is the banning of these political parties, not only does it weaken the populations of the people in Ukraine that believe in whatever it is these parties have to offer, it marginalizes them even more than they already are, and it takes away any kind of opportunity they have to be heard. You know, I mean, that's what this is. And the accusation that they're somehow linked to Russia and Vladimir Putin, to me, it confuses me a bit. It strikes me as an excuse, a cover-up, something that in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. I read up a little bit more on this, and the leaders of these parties that he banned, I mean, they voiced dissent to the Russian invasion. They weren't happy about it in the slightest. And so what I'm saying is the banning of these political parties is nothing more than an authoritarian move. It doesn't do anything to help the people in Ukraine and help them against their current fight and struggle. That's what this is. And of course, this isn't going to be talked about in mainstream U.S. media or West media in general because they have a narrative to prolong. But I think it's quite amazing how seemingly the left wing just got the hammer slammed down on them, but the Azov Battalion and the many other, because there are several other right-wing groups that have a lot of power in Ukraine, are virtually untouched, and they're going to continue to be untouched as Western media downplays their presence in Ukraine's government. Of course, you have the Russian side that want to bolster their presence and make it seem like it's a bit more than what it is. And, you know, given the convenience of that argument, one can surmise that that's not the truth. But the fact of the matter is they're a very significant force within Ukraine and should be dealt with in a very concise way. But it isn't being done. And you see who is, in fact, being dealt with. And you can expect things like this to continue. And there are many examples of shock therapy that we have seen across the globe throughout history. I'll just give you one example that came out of the United States. After 9/11, we had what is known as the War on Terror, and it was a form of shock therapy. We saw the great expansion of the security apparatus, things like NSA spying, these very warped and insidious inventions by state leaders and people with a lot of power in order to make these permanent changes in order to further their narratives and their goals. And they do it in these very tumultuous moments where it's easy to do so, and the people are psychologically and mentally warped and their backs are against the wall. And so it's really easy to do these types of things. And look, man, this is a move that the leader, Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine, has made in this very tense moment. And it's something that should be looked upon, not as something that was the right thing to do, because it wasn't, but as something that he and they are actively doing during a moment of great unrest in order to try to achieve whatever it is they would like to realize. Now, of course, I'm not saying that everything that comes with the shock doctrine or shock therapy and what it truly means applies to this situation here in Ukraine, specifically to the T, as it regards the banning of political parties and what have you. But I do think there are several similarities, especially given the current moment that we're in and the actions that these leaders are deciding to take.